folks are on retreat today, getting a lot of good dosage of Scripture, studying on their own in a remote place somewhere, and preparing their hearts and minds for not only a study at UTC, but especially in what they do at the Christian Student Center. I fully admire the fervor that they have and what they're up to. This morning we're talking about life, making it count. I want to read something I read some time ago. It says that there is a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for and why it's here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. There is also another theory which states that's already happened. Makes us stop and think about life, does it not? If you were told, I don't know how many of you played basketball or ever played basketball, but if you were told that you were going to be given 1 week's time to practice with a basketball in order to be able to shoot it through a hoop from half court and get $1 million, would you think about trying that? I think probably so. Now, let me give you this scenario. 4 options as far as what to do with your life during that week's time. Number 1, you get the key to the gymnasium, and they tell you can practice every day you want, all the way up to the time of going up there and shooting that one finale, one-shot chance for the $1 million. And so you go every day, 8 hours a day, on and off practicing, not wearing your arm out and getting everything right. That's option 1. Second option is that you go twice, maybe once on Wednesday and once on Friday before the Saturday opportunity comes up, and you go a couple hours. Third option is that you go 5 minutes before you're supposed to be there, and you take a couple of shot practices, and then you say, I'm ready. And the final option is that you call a friend and say, would you call me Saturday, wake me up in the morning so I make sure that I get there on time? Now, which one of those 4 do you think you would choose? Option 1, no? Anybody want to choose 2 or 3? Would you not be down there practicing as much as you felt would help you to be effective? Not wearing your arm out too much because it's quite a distance to shoot, but you want to make sure that you took every opportunity because you only have one shot for that $1 million. Now, this is what we're talking about this morning. Next slide. The fact is that you only get one life. But in this case, there are no rehearsals. There are no do-overs, as they say. There's no overtime. When it ends, it ends. You have one life. One life to choose, one life to go from. There's no instant replays. And so now as we're looking at making it count, I want you to see that more than $1 million worth, what are we investing in making that one life actually count? Now I want to talk about a couple people this morning mentioned in the Bible, but first person I want to talk about is a farmer. Second one, be an aristocrat. But just imagine there's a farmer. He's a hardworking, smart person, and he gets out there early in the morning and he's planting his vineyard or whatever he's putting out, and he's getting things going, and then afterwards he's watching the crop and he's making sure everything's just right. He's a great person, a hardworking individual. Matter of fact, he's also productive in what he does, because when he gets through with his crop, he realizes that he's got to have a bigger place to store everything, and so he sets it up. And by every bit of world's standards, if this guy's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and this person is, they would call him successful because he's produced a great crop. Matter of fact, he might look at his own life and he would say, I'm a model example for around here as far as what's farming's about here, because I get up extra early in the morning, I work late hours, and I produced a great crop. I've hired all kinds of people here to work my fields, and at the end of the time, I've got to even build and advance to even larger barns, and so I've got people working all this, and so I am successful. Matter of fact, I think I ought to run for president. After all, people look at me as someone that's productive, that knows how to direct things and organize things. And so that's what we would say if we were looking at things from a world's point of view. And however, there's another side to that. in Luke chapter 12, Jesus talks about such a farmer. He begins because there's a question that's posed to him by an individual as Jesus is there teaching. Now, Jesus, remind you, at the beginning of this section here, is out talking about eternal matters, things that are consequential, that last forever. He's talking about the importance of recognizing who he is and the people will own up to following him. So as he's teaching this vast crowd, verse 13, it says, one from the crowd says to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, Jesus is talking about important matters. All of a sudden, we're switching to world things. Questions asked. But he says to him, verse 14, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter over you?" Pause there for a second, because actually Jesus can do that. And we'll participate in that. But at that moment, that's not what he wants to take on. And so that's why he's saying the things that he's done. But he really wants to call into question where the guy's thinking is actually going. I don't even want to stop and think about this, basically judging such a trivial matter. Now, it may not be trivial to you as far as receiving an inheritance. But from Jesus' point of view, it's so. And so he continues in verse 15. So he says to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." And then he spoke to them a parable. He's saying this: "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully," like the farmer, you see. "And he thought to himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no room now to store my crops?' So he said, 'I'll do this. I will build down my barns and I'll build greater ones.'" You see, he's got enough to produce and add to and grow even further. "And there I will store all my crops and my goods. And then I'm going to say to my soul, 'Soul, you have many goods laid up for you for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and just be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" By the world's standards, you could look at the top there, successful farmer, successful barn builder, productive in the neighborhood, and yet he was a spiritual failure as far as God's concerned because he didn't know God. God didn't fit in this man's plans. As we're looking at what's going on here and making life count, the first thing that Jesus is laying out here for us is make sure you're counting the right things. For this farmer here in the parable described by Jesus counts a lot of things, counts crops, counts growth, counts success, counts barns, counts ease, counts retirement, and all those things to us count as human beings. And yet when you put those on the scales of what's important, they count for nothing when God is not in the plan. So as we're asking ourselves this question, remember you only get one shot. Make it count. Make it count for what's right in life. Now there's another person I want to talk about here. It's an aristocrat, as I'll call him. Incredible wealth. Matter of fact, it's described in the Bible that where he was at, everything was just so plentiful that all the vessels in his house were described as being made of pure gold. That silver wasn't even found in his house. Not that they didn't think that it was something, but it was so common you could find those out on the street. They're just part of the rocks that are out there. That's how wealthy that man and the community that he lived in and the place that he kind of took care of was. He was quite a builder himself. Produced incredible things, designed things, and did things like nobody else ever did in that day and time. And he was known for his wisdom. Or perhaps you understand who I'm talking about, because he was not a person that was just admired and someday would run for president, but he was himself king. And he was described as the name Solomon. Now, Solomon's described later in life as being a wise person, and these are suggestions that he gives to us in Ecclesiastes 12. Now, remember that in his writing in this book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon has already built all of these things. He has established everything in life that could be done in that community. He has reigned over this area. He has provided wisdom. He's guided his people. It's been a prosperous, peaceful time like never ever been. People came, matter of fact, the Queen of Sheba came to visit him just to see what he had. Because people came back with such incredible stories about him, she had to see it for herself. And when she returned home, her comment was, the half has not been told about this man. How great, how wealthy, and how providing he was. And yet he'll write in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 2, these words. Vanity, vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of all vanities, all is vanity. Now, as he's beginning to describe all of these things out here, you got to understand what he's talking about here. That everything out there is meaningless. That the wealth that I had, the construction that I had, all of the pleasures that I sought along the way really are meaningless. Chapter 2, matter of fact, verse 15 will describe it as thus. He says, so I said in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so also happens to me. So why then was I more wise than the other? What gain was I making in all of this? Now, if you do a Google search for the word vanity, you'll get all kinds of designs of all these little things that have mirrors on them and whatever. They're called vanities that people sit in front of. And there's a reason that it's called that here. But the idea of vanity here is something more, I guess, deeper significance than that. Think of it as something different than a human being in front. Think of it as maybe a monkey or something in front of a vanity. Now, there's a reason that these are called vanities. Instead of a human being up there and decorating himself and fixing their hair and painting the lipstick or whatever, you think about a monkey going in for makeup. And you're looking at this and you're thinking, this is show. Because in a few minutes, this is going to be all wiped off, rubbed off. The monkey doesn't like this. It's not made that way. It's not going to be permanent. There is no change, you see. The monkey's still the monkey. And whatever's going on is worthless, meaningless, empty. And those words, matter of fact, are oftentimes translated in modern translations instead of the word vanity in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. All of these things are empty and meaningless. And so, I guess as we're looking at what's going on here, this wise man Solomon, who has gained everything, he has built everything, he's enjoyed every pleasure you could ever imagine, from the best of the food, the best of the women, and everything out there, and he gets back and he's looking at things from a different perspective as he gets a little older, and he goes, this is taking me nowhere, and it's not helping me in any way. Instead of building vanity, let's take a look at what he says in chapter 12 of this very same book. As he's going through what's oftentimes called the most pessimistic book in the Bible, and some skeptics even think this can't be really a Bible book. Somehow we got it stuck in there, but it doesn't belong. And yet it does very well because it looks at things from the world's point of view, and it says everything you're out there doing is not worth anything. And then you get to the conclusion of the matter in chapter 12, and this is what you get. Verse 1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Now, what is being described here, of course, comparison of youth to aged. You know, when you're young and you're drop something on the floor, you just reach down and you grab it. But as our beloved Gene Arnold used to say, when he dropped something on the floor, and he'd bend over, and this was in his 70s, and he'd say, while I'm down here, does anybody need anything? It's difficult, you see. Those are the difficult days. Brother Marvel Tinker used to say in the latter part of his life, when he'd come out and say, hey, Marvel, how are you doing? He says, I'm here. And that was making a statement for the condition he was in. Because the days were difficult. And so by contrast, the wise man Solomon says, remember back when you're young. Remember God then. Don't wait till the last minute, the difficult days. Don't wait till you're 85 or 90 and then start thinking about God. But start while you're young. Now, I realize not everybody in here is young. But if you haven't started, then let's say start now. Now, I want you to understand this idea of this word remember for just a moment. Because he's not asking you to think about God and say, oh yeah, I remember there's a God. A son out there reminded me this morning. I'll think about that a couple of times this week. But he was talking about that being a steady, regular reminder of you in this creator. It's amazing. He uses the word creator as opposed to just God. Both would be true. But he's hanging this word creator out there before you to remind you that what you have of God's creation came from him. Remember your creator, the one that sustains you, the one that takes care of you, the one that has given you everything out there. Do it while you're young. Do it while you have time, because as we're saying, you only get one shot. And life has gone that quick. And the young people are going, oh no, it takes forever just to get from my birthday to Christmas. Yeah, those were the days. And the old people are nodding their heads going, boy, I mean, you wake up one morning, you think, is today my birthday already? It goes by so incredibly fast. You get one shot. There's no rehearsals. It's the real life performance. And then at the end of that very same chapter, he says, this is the bottom line. I'm paraphrasing. He calls it the conclusion of the matter. And sometimes we use the word the bottom line. It's like, okay, you're reading all of these little fine print. Tell me what I really have to do. Give me the bottom line. And so Solomon says, here it is. Fear God and keep his commandments. Depending on your translation, it'll say, for this is man's whole. This is the whole of man, or the all of man, or this is man's whole duty. All of that fits together in that package deal of remembering God. You do it when you're young, and then you remember why. Because you're to be fearing God. Now, that doesn't mean you stand trembling scared because he's standing up there with lightning bolts just ready to hit you if you cross the line the wrong way. Not at all. We have, in our lifetime, people that grace our way. That when you look to that person, everything about him inspires you, challenges you, reminds you of what you ought to be. And you would never dare in front of that person or near that person ever do anything out of line because of your respect for them. Because if you did, you know they'd look at you and go, why'd you do that? And you'd be so ashamed. That's an idea of what we're talking about here. In a respect and a fear for an awesome God. Fear God, and then keep his commandments. And those are written in the scriptures there. Those are the two things that this man who is so wise says to us after he's had everything. Now, this idea of commandments today is not a very well-liked thing. Nobody likes commands anymore. And we just kind of want to push it aside because we want to decide what our commands are. Let's call it the 10 suggestions instead of the 10 commandments. But the word actually is there in the Hebrew, and it's there written in our English. It's a commandment. Now, try commandment or law when you're talking to a police officer sometime. He pulls you over on the side road and he says, but I do keep the law. Well, several of them. It's just that speeding one out there I don't like, so I'll just do it the way I want. But I do stop most of the time for the stop signs, especially when somebody else is coming the other way, and I don't commit adultery, and I don't steal, and I can name all these good laws out here I don't do, but that doesn't do too good when you're doing 90 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Even if you are in the hurry trying to get the Lord's Supper to the table. Remember? And keep His commandments. And you think, well, that's really asking for a lot. Yeah. But you had no problem going down to that gym every day practicing for that one shot. Now, this one shot is life. And the outcome out of all of that is eternal life. Because you could spend $1 million in a week's time if you really tried. You might last 2 weeks, I don't know. But eternal life, that's something incredible. Now, as we're looking at all these things, I want you to realize there's something else in there. You get only one life. Let's remember that. The question is, what are you doing with yours? Again, this is not a rehearsal. This is the real thing. Now, the latter part of Ecclesiastes. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing. God's going to do that. There's a reason that we want to practice in the gymnasium every day. There's a reason why we want to live the Christian life and treat God the way He deserves and honor His commandments, because there is a premium out there and there's also a judgment out there. I don't want God's judgment. It is real. We all are living the real life. It's not a rehearsal, and it's being judged. You have one life. One life. Make it count. Are you making it count? As you look at your life and you analyze it the way the Scripture is describing it, are there changes needed? And not in front of the makeup mirror where you just do some touch-up, because we're not looking at monkeys here. We're looking at changing inside. Are you living for God? Is He Lord over your life? Are you a Christian this morning? One life. Make it count. And if not, God is not in control. Give Him control. Would you, while we stand, sing?